any behavior taken to extremes is not healthy.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. I'm so excited for the first edition of the Q&A episode of the podcast. This is something I've been really excited about doing. And I know Matt, who is joining me today, has been really excited about this. So Matt, here we are.
Oh, so glad to be here, Isaac. I love getting questions from parents and sharing ideas with you.
Likewise. So I should preface this to all of you listeners with something that you all know, but I want to emphasize it. When it comes to your child's education, nobody has like the answer. We're all trying to figure this out. And that's hopefully what we're doing on this episode, is kind of learning out loud, trying to figure it out together. So we don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers, least of all me. Luckily, Matt Bowman does have almost all the answers.
No, I was going to say, I think we might want to have our producer put like a disclaimer at the bottom of the podcast that says every child is unique. Every family situation is different. Take these ideas with a grain of salt.
Yep. And I'll tell you what, man, I've been doing podcasts and writing and stuff, talking about ideas in education for like probably 15 years. And my oldest child is now 19. So I will tell you, each year, so when I started doing it, I had my youngest, my only child was 4. Each year since, my confidence in what I'm saying gets less, not more. So every kid, I have 4 kids now. They're all so different, and I've just learned, and kids will humble you too. So,
well, that's interesting. I would have to say so now all 5 of our children are in their 20s. Our oldest actually just turned 30. So seeing how they have adopted some of these things in their adult life is actually super interesting to me. So it might be a little curved down as they're 18, 19, 20, and then 23, 24, 25.
That's actually a great point. And I would not be surprised if that is a actual pattern, because I think about my mom homeschooling us, and all she ever did was feel like she was doing everything wrong. And like, oh, we should have done this. I can't believe we didn't do that. And of course, when we were teens, we didn't make it easy on her. All we did was complain about things that we didn't like, and didn't constantly compliment her on things we did like. But all of us, as we got older and had our own kids, we all started to be like, oh, I didn't even realize these things I took for granted that are not normal, that I appreciate so much, and I want to instill in my own kids. And I think my mom now is like, hey, I actually did an okay job, Well,
I think there's a funny line that says something like, when a child turns 24, they're amazed how much their parents have learned over the past 10 years.
Okay, so I got 5 years to go with my oldest. So let's dive right in. We got a whole bunch of questions. Some of these came from Facebook. Some of them came from people in the program over email. Some of them came through Slack, all over the place. So appreciate it to everybody. And just to put out there, we want more of these questions. We just keep a running list. And when we record these on a regular basis, we'd love to go back to those questions. And if you're willing to include your name and where you're from, all the better. If not, we'll just read them anonymously and do our best to answer. So.
And I'd even say, if you're comfortable, throw in a general age range of your child that you're asking the question for.
Yes.
That really helps a little bit more, because again, every child's unique, but even if some of our answers can be tailored to the individual parents who asked it around a younger child, a middle level child, or an older child, I'd say throw in an age if you're comfortable with that.
I love it. And you can send those directly to me if you want. Morehouse@opened.co. Feel free to send those in anytime. So here we go. Let's start off. I've got a big list. We probably won't get through all of them today, but I want to start off with some that had multiple parents echoing them. So my kid is obsessed with just one subject. Is that cool, or should I be worried? Matt?
My short answer is feed the interest. So I don't think that's a worry. I think it's an opportunity to gather all the resources you can and feed that interest. It'll eventually change and shift, but feed it for now. What do you think?
I always like to say, when somebody is obsessing over one thing and diving really deep into it and mastering it, take something that feels unrelated to your typical academic disciplines, like piano. If a child does nothing but piano for months at a time and just obsesses over it and masters it, at the end of that time, what have they learned? It's not piano. I mean, they've learned piano too, but they've learned how to master something. They've learned how to learn, how to be obsessed, how to go deep on something. And I think that often gets missed when you get into the world of work, of value creation, the ability to say, here's a problem and I need to like obsess over it and go deep and solve it. That's really hard for people who have always just sort of been like tracked on 50-minute segment. Right, exactly. So like, don't worry so much about what the subject is. I remember reading some stories from the Sudbury Valley School, which is like a very kind of like unschool school. It's been around for a long time, where one kid spent an entire year doing nothing but fishing and just learning how to fish, doing like everything, obsessing over different lures. And like, that's all he cared about. And they just let him do it. Then one day he got interested in math and he learned math really quickly because he applied that same obsessive deep dive mentality to it. So they're learning how to learn as well.
Yes. And I think, again, our children are probably going to be tired of us always citing examples from our own families. But one of my sons got into diamonds one time and just wanted to learn everything about diamonds and study the history, why they're so valuable, or the markets and how to analyze the colors and shapes and values of diamonds. And he did that for a couple of weeks. And that was super interesting. And he learned more about that. And to your point, he then learned, if I'm interested in another topic, here's some steps I can take to dive deep into it quickly.
Love it. Okay, here's another one. They got multiple upvotes. How do I give my child freedom without totally winging their future?
You start with that one, Isaac.
All right, I'll start on this one. Just at a general level, and I don't want this to sound too general, but I think this is, without more specifics of this specific person's situation, this is the level that I think it makes sense to me. Focus on principles and foundations, things that will always be true. So if you're worried about them having freedom, that means that they're not properly getting prepared for the future. That kind of implies that you are able to predict what that future holds, and you probably aren't. Maybe within some boundaries, you can say things that are likely somewhat, but it's pretty hard. I mean, especially if you're talking about career, like things that your kids will be doing in 20 years probably don't exist yet. So it's very hard to predict that. So what can you focus on? Things that will always be true. Principles, their character, their ability to learn, like we mentioned, their resiliency, their ability to handle failure and not let it beat them and get back up, their curiosity, those things that will be valuable no matter what they do. If the freedom you're giving them is putting them in an environment where you feel like those are being cultivated, don't worry too much about the specifics.
Yeah, I think it actually adds on to some of the things we were said in the first question around if they, want to dive deep or that kind of thing. So I think, to your point, igniting curiosity is something that we always need to have throughout our life. Like just being a curious person allows kind of that foundation to pursue interests and things, whatever it is, when we're 10 or 20 or 100. Curiosity is something I think we can develop in all children and adults. And that's the greatest gift we can give young people.
I might even, not to contradict you, but I almost feel like it's not even that curiosity needs to be developed. It's natural. We need to make sure that
it's not blocked,
that it's not lost. Because that's not just things that parents do, but just sort of the world in general. There's this pressure as you grow moving through life to sort of dampen that curiosity and kind of like, shut it down eventually. And the more you can try to remove the things that do that and realize you're working with something, you're working with an instinct that's already in there to a degree. You don't have to start from scratch.
No, that's a good point, that it's naturally in us. Society blocks it from us sometimes. So,
yep. Okay. So I love this one. I feel like I'm making this up as I go. Is that normal?
Yes. Isn't that parenting 101? Like none of us were given a handbook when we had our first child.
Yep.
So winging it as parents is very applicable to helping our children decide what they want to, what they're interested in, what they're curious about, what they need. All those things are day to day. Like just do your best. All of us are doing that.
There has never been a human in the history of the world that is exactly like your child. So nobody knows what it's like to help your child learn. There are principles and things, and you can commiserate with others for sure. But there's, It's like the imposter syndrome, right? The idea like, I don't think I know what I'm doing and everybody else does. The cure for imposter syndrome is not finally feeling like you know what you're doing. It's realizing that no one else knows what they're doing either. And I think that's
the social media and influencers that might sound like they know what they're doing. Yeah, that's why we started with our disclaimer. We really don't know what we're doing. We're just sharing ideas and thoughts that hopefully trigger and adapt to your family situation. But just know that every person's different, every family's different, and we're all just trying to do our best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't let that make you feel bad. Okay, Matt, I know you're going to love this one in particular. You're probably one of the best people in the world to answer this question.
Which one is it?
Without grades and report cards, how do I know if we're actually learning anything?
Yeah, that's a heavy question because it challenges a very core belief that we think standardized testing can assess learning. So that's one that I really wrestle with if that's true or not. We often don't, we agree we don't really measure compassion. We don't measure love. We don't measure empathy. We really don't measure curiosity or creativity. What if we can't really measure a child's learning, right? So that's kind of an extreme point of view to start with. And if you kind of wrestle with that maybe standardized testing isn't an indicator of X, Y, and Z that we might have thought it is. So kind of put standardized testing in its place as a tool, but not the end all be all. Then apply the concept of every child also is not only unique in their personalities and learning styles, but in their child development schedule. Not every child at 3rd grade and 2 months reads at the state testing expectation. We have children that are older, children that are younger, everywhere in between. And so we really can't get too caught up in, does my child meet the average state standard of the 3rd grade 2-month scale when they've learned to walk at their own time, they're learning to talk their own time, they crawl at their own time, they ride the bike at the different times. We don't worry about that. We just move forward and feed them with resources to help them succeed.
I have nothing to add to that answer. I love that. Screen time, friend, foe, or frenemy? I'm going to quickly say frenemy. I think it's easy to treat anything that's fairly new like it's utterly unlike anything that's come before. And there are elements of that are true. I mean, like in some sense, the internet is utterly unlike things that have come before.
Right.
But in other senses, the patterns hold. So any new technology, any new thing that sort of disrupts the norms and the norms of human behavior or societal behavior, they're always hard. They always bring challenges and they always bring opportunities and risks. Screen time absolutely can have negative effects. I have seen it with my own kids. We started out way too loosey-goosey about screen time. We're like, he's playing Minecraft, he's learning. It's all good, it's all cool. And they're like, wow, why is he acting so rude and impatient and like looks like a zombie? Like, bro, the screen time thing needs limits, needs parameters. And we had to figure that out and wrestle with it. My first 3 kids all got the experiment, and my 4th kid, we got it dialed down now. But I think you have to recognize you can't just, you can, but I would not recommend just saying, hey, it's all good. Technology is our friend. Let them learn technology and just no holds barred, go for it. Because you got to watch each individual kid. That's too much for some kids. They can't, they're not ready to regulate it themselves. And it's a dopamine hit. It's, might be overwhelming. On the other hand, you don't want to just be like, I'm throwing it all in the garbage. We're moving out to the woods. We're going off the grid. I have been tempted to do that at times, but I think recognizing that like we have to be strong enough as humans to handle the kind of technologies and things that the world introduces and master them and not let them master us. And I think that's possible. It's always a process of give and take, but I think technology can be such a powerful tool for your kid learning. If you're listening to this, there you go, right? You're listening to this because of screens. So figuring out that balance is hard, but there is a balance.
Yes, I agree. And I would just add that we need to be balanced in all things, right? And so there's this principle of just human behavior. Any behavior taken to extremes is not healthy. And so, even if it's a really good thing, like if you you can take something too far. So it's really trying to achieve a balanced lifestyle. And I think it's important to just have conversations with how do you incorporate devices as tools into your lifestyle. That's one area. The other area I would say is we sometimes just forget the value of helping kids get exhausted, physically exhausted. And so there's just so much structure in our children's days with everything structured that, there's lots of research reports out there around unstructured playtime is what's missing from today's children. And I really believe that. I think that and there's studies that say young boys can't learn math well if they're not physically exhausted. So they should have an hour-long recess, not recess cut in half because they need more math study, right? It's the opposite. Give a kid 60 minutes of recess and he'll learn 20 minutes of math faster than if you skip the recess. So just those principles, we've got to exhaust our young people physically to help them be prepared to learn. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, that's such a good point. It's so amazing when sometimes my wife will just say to the kids, all right, you know what? Go outside and run around the house 5 times.
Yeah.
Like I can just tell you got too much of the jumpies, the zoomies in you.
Yep.
One thing I want to throw on that I was thinking of as you said that, and I think this will tie into another question we have coming up in a minute. Don't underestimate either when it comes to, okay, I want my kids to sort of learn how to use these tools, but not get sucked in and get too addicted to them. Don't underestimate the power of what you model, what your kids observe you do, because the rules and things you can give them obviously are important, are going to play a role, but they internalize what they see. And I find myself all the time, I'll be like, kids, no screens until you've done some other things and whatever. And then I'm like sitting there putting in my fantasy football lineup on the couch on my phone and they're watching me, right? I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not modeling this the best. So I think it starts with us. Like, do I have a healthy relationship with screens? Am I getting sucked into social media too much? Let me get that addressed first, and then I can start to kind of model that as I introduce it for my kids.
Yeah, I think one of the classic lines, I don't know who first said it, something like, teach all the time, use words when necessary.
Yeah.
Oh. Right. It's the principle of what you're doing is teaching 1,000 times more than what you say often to children, especially.
Yep. Oh, I love that. Okay, this is related to the grades one, but I think it's actually slightly different because there is a connection to this, to maybe other things that you're interested in for your kids. So it's, should I worry if my kid scores below grade level on standardized tests? I'm going to say no, unless ... but I want to hear Matt's take first.
Yeah, it goes back to the other point of every child's unique. They're developing and growing at a different rate. If there's some learning disability, some challenges, right? It's okay to identify, hey, my child actually has learning disability. I need to get some help and figure out how to help him or her manage that disability. It's not going to go away, but there's tools and ways to manage it. But other than that, it's if you feel like they're functioning well, they're just a different pace. They've gone ahead in some areas and feel behind in others. Don't fret. Let their natural development cycle catch up. Some people, even like I'm a big sports guy, and some people say don't even judge talent till they're 15 or 16 on the basketball court, right? And we have all these little leagues running at 5th grade, 6th grade. Are they the best in 7th grade? You just can't even judge talent that's going to last until they're 15 because there's so much growth and development still to happen. And we start judging kids at 8, right, on academically, even though they could be a year behind because they're an August birthday, not a September birthday. That's a whole nother thing is we somehow pick September 1st as the cutoff. And so now the August 31st kid is immediately a year behind. And we don't even talk about that.
My answer, the reason that I said, don't worry about grade level on standardized tests unless, is because there's another question we got, which is related, that says, I think I might want to send my kids back into the traditional school system at some point. This is often in common in high school, for example. Kids want to go do more, be engaged more every day in high school. So how can I make sure they're on grade level so I can keep that door open? That's my unless. The only reason that you might care about standardized tests is if your child's like, hey, I want to go do my sophomore year at the local public high school, and I'm 15 and all the other kids there are 15, and so I need to be able to do whatever they need a sophomore to be able to do to go there and be with my friends. If that matters to you, it's amazing how much easier it is than you think for your kid to be at that level, even if they're not today. So I think I might have told this story on another podcast, but my son hated math and it was so hard to do math with him. And we really didn't push. We kind of just let him not do hardly anything for several years when it comes to math. He decided when he was 13, he wanted to go to, or 14, I can't remember, he wanted to go to school. And we were like, okay, that's fine. But you got to know, we've had a very, laissez-faire education approach. You're going to have to do these things if you want to be in the grade of kids your age. And he's like, okay, well, what do I need to know? And I'm like, let's go look up what their expectations are for this grade. And he's like, I don't know any of that stuff. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, okay, well, I have a summer. And so he got on Khan Academy and he was literally like, I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm going to start at kindergarten math on Khan Academy. And he was 13 and he went through everything and caught up to 9th grade in like 2 months. And he was fine. It was okay. So that's the point. The just-in-time learning is so much more effective than just-in-case learning. So you're just learning things that you don't really need to know for any reason, at least from the child's perspective, just in case I need to know it someday. It's very little does that stick. But if you're like, oh no, I need something. I want to go to this school. Now I need to know this thing at this level. This urgency to go learn and catch up, it's way easier than you might think. So that's the one area where you may, say, let's find out where you are if you want to go to a traditional school. And if it's worth it to you to catch up on these subjects, here's what that's going to take.
Yeah. And what I love about that story is it's the child raising his hand and saying, what do I need to do to accomplish X goal? Yep. And we so much devalue motivation in the learning cycle. We think that we can just assess a kid at 3rd grade in a standardized classroom and that they're motivated to pass the test when they have no need to, and it matters not. Like, why we don't even account for motivation as a test score factor when your son demonstrated motivation and did 9 years of math in a couple months, right? So, I mean, that kind of motivation matters. And you have to acknowledge that when the assessment or the content or the hoop you've asked me to jump through seems ridiculous to my 10-year-old brain, even, it's not going to stick. You can force it. It's not going to stick until that child is motivated and wants to learn something.
Yep. I try to teach that same son spreadsheets so many times because I love spreadsheets. I think they're amazing. And he just eyes would glaze over. All of a sudden, once we said he turned 18 and he had to start paying for his own car insurance and cell phone. And then he had to have a budget. And he's like, hey, can you show me how to do a budget on that spreadsheet thing that you tried to show me so many times over the years and I ignored? So,
well, that leads to what you and I are passionate about is entrepreneurship creates such an interdisciplinary motivation.
Yes.
From English, math, science, social studies, intercommunication, everything is found in entrepreneurship.
And to getting back to the, should I worry about standardized tests and grade levels? I don't know about your experience, Matt. I'm sure you would echo this. How many entrepreneurs have you met who are like, oh, I was an idiot in school. I got bad
almost
grades.
All.
Right? So these are people who are very successful, more successful than the average person. And they even to this day, a lot of them have internalized that. And they're like, well, I'm stupid, but I just happen to be able to build this business. Because all of the growing up, they were like, you're not caught up to where everyone else is on these subjects. And it's like, there's no way to test the fact that they have the ability to go out and build a business, which is a special ability.
Well, it's actually, and we could spend a whole nother podcast on that, which is, it might be indicative of their risk threshold also to go start businesses because they have faced failure in school.
That is so interesting. That's so interesting because even just the social risk or risk of embarrassment for getting a bad grade, people who are like, yeah, I can tolerate that. That's a very interesting. Oh man.
Yeah,
okay.
Straight students have a really hard time starting businesses because there's too much unknown. It's risky. It's there's not a exact test key that they can follow. There's no syllabus, right? So it's really kind of interesting, that macro scale of who goes into entrepreneurship.
So here's a positive takeaway for a parent. If you have a child that you're like, why do they not seem motivated by like getting a good grade or getting a gold star? That could be an indicator of some good attributes.
Yep.
It's not just a negative thing like, oh,
Absolutely.
I wish they cared. Yeah. I like that. This one is from Stacy. I think this came through Facebook. So thank you, Stacy. Shout out. How do I help my kids find their passions if they don't want to try anything new?
What have you done with your kids, Isaac?
This is a really hard one because I have had a couple of my kids who are like, oh, I'll do anything new. It all sounds fun. And a couple of my kids who are like, nope, don't want to try it. Here's one thing that has helped. I would not say I have solved this because this is definitely something that I ponder and think about a lot. One thing that has helped is to start doing things around them, even things that are not necessarily interesting to me that I wouldn't otherwise do, that I have a hunch they may find interesting. Not telling them to do it. This weird thing that happens, especially when kids get to a certain age. If you're like, hey kids, you should learn about this. Oh, go learn this. Their reaction is, no, right. I don't want to do that. That's
not likes cool. It. Why would I?
Totally. Like I remember when I was a kid, my mom would get us, Christmas present. We'd have like a present for the whole family. And she'd be like, okay, open the family present. And the first thing, we'd ask, oh, is it educational? Right. Cause like, if I know that you really want me to learn, I'm going to be like, push against that. Right. Kids have this independent feeling. So rather than trying to say, you should try this, you should try this. If you can just do more things in their presence, like pull up a documentary about something that maybe you yourself aren't even interested about, but just watch it and enjoy it. And don't even say, come watch this with me or anything. Start to like get out, your old whatever microscope that you had in the closet and just start like looking at leaves and looking at things and don't even say anything about it. And kids will often be like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just doing this. It doesn't always work perfectly, but I think taking it on and saying, okay, if I want my kids to be exposed to more ideas so that they can figure out things that they may not even realize they're passionate about, I got to put them in more environments where those things are happening, not just rely on sort of mandating them to explore it and to go do it on their own. So I think that can kind of help, like just taking them interesting places without even saying we're going on an educational trip, letting them see things rather than always telling, showing rather than telling.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I think it validates this model in your own life, your interest in learning, right? And then, if you want to bring in some things that you think they might be interested in, but even just sharing with them, hey, I got really interested in learning how to grow a flower in our backyard. And so I've studied this on a YouTube channel. I've read a book about it. Come see the flower that I produced and model for them what learning looks like. And they can start saying, oh, can I do that for soccer, or can I do that for something else? Right. So they can start to see that adults enjoy learning. And I think modeling that is kind of a first step. The second thing I'll say is that it really is around this concept of a detox. So sometimes kids are so wired into compulsed learning that they don't realize they have autonomy to choose something they're interested in. And that detox can take some time. So if you're struggling seeing what your children are interested in, it actually might be good to just detox for a week and then see what they start gravitating towards. And then, nudge and provide a little book on something they say they might be interested in, or a documentary. But they kind of have to let their brains unwind from compulsory learning and forced assignments and forced everything before their brain can even unlock curiosity and interest.
That reminds me of a story. This is another one from the Sudbury Valley School. And I'm not recommending like, oh, everybody has to go do this Sudbury model. But it's a really interesting story of a kid that joined the school. He was like 12 or 13 from a very traditional public school, or maybe private, but a school background, where he was just used to being told everything he had to do and learn. And he shows up and he's like, all right, what do I do? And there's like parents around, but they basically are like mentors or something. They just kind of like make sure the kids are okay. They don't they let him do whatever they want all day, basically. And they're like, whatever you want. And he's like, no, for real, what do I do? And they're like, whatever you want. And he kind of doesn't believe them. So for the first like 2 weeks, I think it was, he literally just sat in a chair and did nothing. And he's kind of like waiting. He thinks he's calling their bluff. Like, I know eventually they're going to make me do something. Finally, he's like, gets up and goes and starts like playing and interacting with the other kids and doing a few things. And then like a week later, he's just in the library reading books all day by himself. Like, you know, at first he was like, you're not going to make me learn anything, you know? And they're like, nope, we're not. And then eventually he got bored and started teaching himself.
Right. So, the power of boredom is a real thing. And, you know, even my daughter, who's now 22, recently got married, and she and her husband both work and come home from work. And she said, Dad, I think for the first time in my life, I understand what you talk about with boredom, because we both now have our evenings free where we sit, we have dinner, and then we're like, now what?
Yep.
And she said, for the first time in my life, I'm starting to realize I can start to learn about stuff I'm interested in. I have mental time, physical, not exhausted. And it's been fascinating to see what she's now focused on learning for now. It may change in a few weeks or whatever, but the power of boredom is powerful because, and getting enough sleep, right? Those were two things that we talked to her about. Is just forever. She's always felt exhausted, you know, just with a busy schedule and everything going on. And now she just feels rested and ready to learn. And I think those are some powerful things to remember how important those things are.
And by the way, as a parent, it's not like these things just happen immediately and you don't have to kind of go through a little pain and suffering and worry for a little while. If you cut like just the power of boredom, your kid's bored, what do I do? And you're like, don't know. Don't ask me. You figure it out. Like, you got to figure out something for the next 2 hours. I'm busy. And it can be really hard to watch them like look around. They don't know what to do. They're asking, and you just feel like I got to solve it for them. I got to like give them something. It's not easy, but and it sometimes takes time. It maybe takes several instances of this.
Totally
but eventually, I've seen it with my own kids. They'll start to find and get into things that you never expected they would. So this is a related question from Stacy, you know, to helping my kids find their passions if they don't want to try anything new. How do I encourage a love of reading if my kids hate books? I will quickly answer, it can change. That can change and totally surprise you. I hated books until I was 16. I did not like reading. I didn't care about it. I was totally like hated reading. I read really slow. Somehow when I turned 16, I think it's because I had a girlfriend and we broke up and then I was depressed. So I started picking up books. And I didn't stop. I love reading. I have all these books behind me. Like, I got really into philosophy and all this stuff. You never would have expected that about me. I was into sports and like Legos and fighter pilots as a kid. Like, I didn't care about reading. So that's just like a little bit of encouragement that it can be really surprising when that could change. The only other thought, and I know, Matt, you probably have a lot of good thoughts on this, but if your kids hate books, trying to, again, model it. Like, so reading aloud, even as they're older. My mom read aloud to us kids all the time. We actually really enjoyed it. And even though it took me a long time to read on my own. Audiobooks with my older kids, sometimes I'll just buy them an audiobook and be like, here, you know, listen to this when you're going out on a walk or whatever. Or they will on their own. Can be a good way to get them going. But Matt, I'm curious if you have thoughts, because this actually interesting anecdote that I heard from on our team, our teachers that help people in the OpenEd program, that the number of kids who have said they hate reading is like twice as high as it was a couple years ago, just in our program. So that's anecdotal, but that's a really interesting thing. And maybe screens have something to do with that, but I'm curious your take on that.
Oh, it's worthy of a long conversation. So let me just shorten some of the thoughts. Definitely think that audiobooks is a great answer for many kids. Play it in the background while they're playing with Legos. Just get them used to stories. So that could be one solution or one idea. The other thing that is interesting is, again, it goes back to how do you figure out their interests and passions. Something that they're interested in might have something written about it, right? Whether it's in a newspaper or a magazine or, you know, that kind of thing. Or even I was thinking, you know, to answer this question, most YouTube videos now have a transcript capability. where you can actually read the transcript of it. So it might be an interesting idea to have them of their favorite, Mr. Beast video or Mark Grover video, whatever, is look at the transcript of it and just read the transcript and compare it to the audio, because sometimes it's off because it was AI generated or something. This concept of reading isn't just pick up a book and go sit down and read it. Reading is all around us, from transcripts to audiobooks to videos. One idea could be watch your favorite movie. Our kids love Shrek growing up. Transcribe the whole movie and then read it, or have your brother or sister transcribe a different movie and you swap. That's reading, right? And it's interesting just to start reading things that aren't just normally a book. And then the other thought is just maybe they have a little bit of nervousness about it. And like your son did, start them at a kindergarten book, right? And let them feel really confident, have it be funny or a nursery rhyme or rhythmic or, something, and have them just start small and then just add up instead of saying you're at third grade or fourth grade, you need to be reading this level. Here's a book, or read it. That's not how to excite kids about reading.
It's funny. My youngest, he's 7 now, but he got really into baseball cards recently.
Yeah.
And we have been working with him on reading, and he could, kind of mostly read, sort of, but he's really not interested in it at all. But with baseball cards, he wants to read all the stats. He wants to read the other teams they've been on. So with his cards, I'm like, he's just telling me all this stuff about all these players. I'm like, where'd you learn that? Oh, from the cards. I'm like, oh, so you read all that? He's like, yeah. But then at night, when we put him in bed, we always read to him. And I'm always like, here, do you want to read the chapter? And he's like, no, I can't read it. I'm like, yes, you can. What does it say? And he'll tell me. Like, he can read, but in his mind, he can't read a book by himself. He hasn't decided. If he's bored, I'm like, go read. And he's like, nah, I can't read. And then he'll go play his baseball cards, and I'll hear him reading the baseball cards. So it'll get there, right? It'll get there. And giving that a little bit of space can be scary, but I love what you said about using things other than books to give them those tools.
Yeah, like the baseball card. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for some of my other kids, it was playing Roblox with their friends, and they wanted to type back and forth.
One other idea, just to do a quick plug for an OpenEd resource, Sneak on the Lot is one of our partners that we work with, and they have dozens, if not many dozens, of screenplays of all the famous movies. So Harry Potter or Star Wars or whatever, go read the screenplay of your favorite movie and just see what the director cut says and where they, how they show Harry Potter walking through the woods or whatever. What does the screenplay show? It's a fascinating way to get a hook into kids' interest into reading.
You spurred all these ideas and things. I forgot, we will watch movies or shows sometimes, and especially if there's characters with a heavy British accent or something, we'll put on subtitles.
Yeah. And
the kids, all of a sudden, they'll start to read the subtitles. And because they're hearing and seeing at the same time, sometimes that's a really great way.
Yeah. Another quick idea is lyrics for songs. So have them write down what they think they hear the words to be, and then go find, search for it and find the actual lyrics and compare the right and wrongs of it. It's fascinating because we all hear different things when the song comes on. And so we all would have written different words for those phrases. And then if you actually go get the real lyrics and compare them, that's a reading activity.
Your kid has to be super genius level if they can listen to a Pearl Jam song and figure out what they're saying.
The words are.
Yeah. Okay. We have 3 more. I think we can get to 3 quick ones before we wrap it up. So, this is a fun one. My answer would be very short. Should I be giving my kids assignments, or is it okay to let them come up with their own projects and just be there to offer support and encouragement? Yes. Matt?
A little bit of both.
Right. Yes.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a principle that my wife and I often talk about is love, limits, and latitude. So you need a little bit of everything. You need a whole lot of love, but you need some limits. And then with those limits, you need some flexibility. So yes to both. Is it's okay to, as an adult, step in and say, these are responsibilities we have in our house. And I'd like us all to participate in X, Y, and Z. And then here's some free time that we all can do self-directed learning projects. And that's just great. So
I've gone too far in both directions, and hopefully I'm at a good balancing spot right now. So yeah, I love that. Will my child be limited in their future because of homeschooling? Can my student go to college without a high school diploma? Matt, you've got a lot of stuff on this as well, but I'll tell you that
you have a personal story.
I don't have a high school diploma. I never took the ACT or SAT, but I have a associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree. So the short answer is no, they will not be limited in their future. And yes, they can absolutely go to college without a high school diploma. In my case, I went to the community college, which didn't care about that because I was doing it during high school. I was dual enrolled. Then I just took my credits from there and transferred those to the four-year college. They didn't ask about a diploma because I already had college credits from a community college. I think I already had an associate's. So you can do it without a diploma. You can also make your own diploma. High school, college admissions, generally speaking, are very homeschool friendly. Homeschoolers tend to do very well in college. At the end of the day, if you're paying tuition, they don't care that much. There is no limitation in terms of college. Then there's a broader question of, is college the right thing? For many people, I don't think it is. Go, because that's what everyone does. Homeschoolers have an advantage where they're used to thinking differently and thinking for themselves, and are potentially better at assessing whether or not college is the right next best step.
It's a decision to be made, not a default decision that everyone has to do, for sure. I remember Harvard is the brand that everyone always says, well, whatever Harvard does, that's the highest level of academia, right? And in 2015, they published an article, New Path to Harvard, Homeschooling, because they saw the value of self-directed learners on their campus versus kids who just waited to be told what to do, that the whole system generates. And so ever since then, every college has made sure they have a homeschool pathway for applications or acceptance. And it's just so open that if you choose that college is the right path, then it really gives you that opportunity to be very flexible in your applications.
Final question. It's sort of more of a comment, but I think there's something interesting here we can talk about. This is from Erica on the OpenEd team. And Erica says that she's been a part of the open education, alternative education world for almost 35 years. And one of the most common things that she comes across is lack of confidence by parents, lack of confidence in their abilities, more so as the kids get older and they feel like they need to learn things that the parent doesn't know. But even from a very young age, they feel like they are not qualified or equipped to teach their child. What is your response to that general sentiment or fear?
I would say there are unlimited amounts of resources that can help children learn, especially in today's world with so many resources available. So the parent doesn't have to be the expert, and lecturing on a topic that you are an expert in might not be the best education environment anyway. So yeah, so tap into resources that are all over, from online to book-based to community-based. And it's almost endless, the opportunities you have to supplement what you do as a parent. Again, the parent, in my view, creates the environment of opportunities, resources, examples, support, love, limits, latitude, that then creates that environment where students can thrive. It's not what the parent has in his or her brain to impart. It's about creating the environment that allows learning to flourish.
That is exactly what I was going to say. It goes back to what we were talking about, curiosity, that relax. They don't have to learn from you. They're learning because they're human, and that's what humans do. Yeah. And your job is not to impart everything that they need to know from your brain into theirs. It's just to use that environment. Put them in an environment where they can do what comes naturally to humans, which is to learn. Remove the impediments, put them in front of the resources, remove the roadblocks, and let that learning that they already want to do because they're humans with goals, let that be the driving force. You're more of a curator, protector, sort of what you said, the 3 L's. What were they again?
Love, limits, and latitude.
Love, limits, and latitude. Bingo. that's your role. It's really just an extension of all the other parts of parenthood.
Yes.
Helping your kids learn is not really any different from helping them grow as a human being in general, which is what parents do. It's just some specific areas of that. If you're used to outsourcing those to someone else, it's not that different.
No, that's a good point. And that's why, it's important to have, a lot of families have, every morning you have chores. You do the dishes, you make your bed, you clean up the room or whatever. That's part of parenting and living. And that's also learning and teaching, right? And so that's opportunities to just incorporate helping your child have the environment and naturalness to all of that instead of forced behavior. Because the children want autonomy. They want some decision making, even at young ages. You want to give them choices and options, and those things help them learn.
Yeah, and remember, your kids, it's not like the limit of their intelligence is whatever their smartest teacher was, right? Even if they go to school, it's like kids will learn more than whatever teachers they had in certain subjects that are interesting to them, right? They're going to exceed that. So, I mean, I don't think any teacher, public, private, or homeschool, would want the pressure of being like, the only things these kids will know are things that I already know. It doesn't work that way. So you can relax a little bit. Hey, this was so much fun. I'll try to find, for all of you listeners, we might already have one and I just don't remember what it is, a simpler email address that's more memorable to send in questions. Otherwise, send them to imorehouse@opened.co or on the OpenEd HQ Facebook page. Anywhere you find us, you can send us. You can reply to the OpenEd Daily if you're subscribed. And just keep your questions coming in. If there's things you'd like to hear, Matt or I talk about or address, we would love to get more of those in the queue. We got to about half of them that we had come in, so we still got a good backlog. And Matt, any final words?
No, this is great, Isaac. Again, just encourage people to submit questions. And with the disclaimer again, every child's unique. Every family situation is different. Don't impose upon yourself any of these ideas that we've said that you have to do. These are just ideas to generate thoughts that maybe will trigger something for you and your child to explore one thing that you hadn't thought of. So all we want to do is generate ideas and resources and thoughts. We are not how-tos, and listen to us as experts.
Yeah. And in that vein, submit answers as well. If you have done things with your own children that you feel have worked related to some of these questions you've heard, we would love to hear those too. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Isaac.